The moment I stepped off the bus and onto the gravel road that led to my aunt's isolated farmhouse, I could already feel the weight of something unusual in the air. The sky was overcast, and the fields stretched out like an ocean of dull brown. My aunt stood waiting at the edge of the driveway, not smiling, not speaking, just holding a folded sheet of paper. As I approached, she handed it to me with trembling hands and said, "Only one thing. Read this carefully. Follow it exactly." Confused, I unfolded the yellowed paper to find a list of handwritten rules. There were 10 in total, each one, oddly, specific and disturbingly urgent. Rule number 3 stood out immediately. Do not look at the scarecrow after sunset under any circumstances. I chuckled nervously, expecting her to crack a smile and admit it was some kind of joke. But her eyes didn't blink. Her voice, steady but grim, said, "It's not a joke. This place has ... its own ways." With no explanation beyond that, she turned and led me into the house. Everything inside looked like a relic from the past, antique furniture, oil lamps instead of electric ones, and a sense of stillness that didn't feel right. That first day passed slowly. I helped her collect eggs, feed the animals, and repair a few things around the barn. But my mind kept drifting back to the scarecrow. It stood in the middle of a dead cornfield, alone and eerie, dressed in tattered overalls and a burlap sack over its head. During the daytime, it looked like nothing more than a forgotten decoration, something to scare off crows or prank city kids like me. But as the sun dipped lower, the sky turning shades of red and purple, my aunt's entire mood shifted. She checked every window, locked every door, and lit candles in specific corners of the house. Before heading upstairs, she warned me again in a whisper, "Don't even glance at it after dark, no matter what." I lay in bed that night, the paper of rules tucked under my pillow, my heart pounding harder with each passing minute. I wasn't scared, at least, not yet, but I was curious. What could possibly be so dangerous about a scarecrow? By midnight, I found myself pacing near the back door, drawn by an irresistible urge. I pulled the curtain aside just an inch and looked out across the field. The scarecrow was still standing there, but it was no longer slumped. It stood rigid, its head tilted in my direction. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. I stepped outside, barefoot, feeling the cool night air hit my skin. Slowly, I walked closer, each step crunching on dried leaves and broken stalks. The moon was high now, casting shadows that shifted with the wind. As I approached the scarecrow, I felt something was wrong. It was taller than I remembered. Its arms, once stiffly spread, now hung slightly lower, as if relaxed. And the worst part, its head slowly turned, following my movement. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The burlap sack it wore had what looked like tears where the eyes should be. I couldn't see what was behind them, but I knew something was watching me. I ran. I didn't look back. I slammed the door behind me and scrambled up the stairs to my room. All night, I stayed awake under the covers, staring at the crack beneath my door, half expecting a straw-covered hand to slip through. The next morning, I told my aunt what I had done. She didn't yell, she didn't scold. She just stared at me with hollow eyes and said, "It knows now. You saw it, and it saw you." That evening, she packed her bags and left without a word, leaving the farm in my care. I haven't seen her since, but every night, the scarecrow is there, and every night, it's just a little closer to the house. On the second day at my aunt's farm, I woke up before dawn to find the house already stirring with quiet unease. My aunt was in the kitchen, boiling water over a gas stove, her expression pale and focused. She handed me a small bowl of oatmeal and pointed to the note still pinned to the fridge, the list of strange rules I was expected to follow. Rule 5 caught my eye this time. Never walk near the well behind the barn after 2 a.m. If you hear a voice coming from it, don't respond. I stared at it longer than the others, feeling something cold twist in my stomach. It seemed oddly specific. Not just don't go out at night, but a particular object, a time, and the warning of a voice. What could possibly be so dangerous about a voice from a well? Throughout the day, I tried to keep my mind busy. There were chores, repairs, and animals to look after. But every now and then, I'd catch my aunt glancing out the window in the direction of the barn. She never talked about what lay beyond it, and she always made sure to come inside before sunset. It wasn't until dinner that I finally asked about the well. Her spoon paused in mid-air. "It's older than the house," she said flatly, "and deeper than it should be. We don't use it. We don't go near it. Not anymore." When I asked why, she didn't answer. She just stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the strange ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway that night. Sleep wouldn't come. I kept waking up, heart racing, the kind of restlessness you feel before a thunderstorm. At exactly 2:12 a.m., I sat up in bed, unsure of why I was suddenly wide awake. Then I heard it, a soft, almost pleading voice. It echoed faintly from the direction of the barn, muffled but unmistakably human. "Help. Please help me," it whispered. My body froze. Every part of me knew I should stay in bed, cover my ears, and ignore it. But curiosity, or something deeper, pulled me from beneath the blankets. I crept downstairs, barefoot on creaking floorboards, heart pounding like a drum. The farmhouse was silent. Not even the wind stirred the curtains. I opened the back door and stepped into the cool night. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale glow over the property. I could see the barn in the distance, and behind it, the dark silhouette of the old well. As I got closer, the voice returned, clearer now. "It's so cold down here, please. Just one hand. Just help me up." It sounded like a child, a young girl, maybe 10 years old. I hesitated at the edge of the barn, unable to see beyond. The shadows, the well was just past the fence, surrounded by a ring of broken stones. No rope, no bucket, just a wide black mouth in the earth. I stepped closer. The voice called again, this time more urgently. "Why won't you help me?" it asked, the tone now tinged with sadness. My eyes scanned the area. There were no footprints, no signs of anyone nearby. I bent down, careful not to get too close, and peered into the well. Pitch black, no bottom in sight. I listened, then everything changed. The voice shifted deeper, distorted and guttural. "You heard me," it growled. "You came to me." I stumbled back, slipping on the damp grass, heart thudding in my ears. From the depths of the well came a rustling sound, like nails on stone or claws dragging along the inside. I turned and ran, not stopping until I slammed the door of the farmhouse behind me. My aunt was waiting in the hallway, fully dressed, as if she had known I'd do exactly what I wasn't supposed to. "You answered it," she said quietly, not angrily, but with a kind of tired acceptance. "It knows your voice now. That's how it starts." I didn't ask what it was. I didn't need to. That night, I heard scratching at the walls outside my bedroom window. The next morning, there were small piles of dirt on the porch, as if something had been clawing its way out of the ground. I've kept my distance from the well ever since, but I still hear the voice sometimes calling from beyond the trees, from beneath the floorboards, from places it shouldn't reach. It's always soft at first, then louder, then angry, and I know it remembers me. The third day on my aunt's farm was unlike the others. Everything felt ... wrong. The chickens didn't make a sound in the morning. The cows refused to leave the barn, and even the dogger, massive sheepdog named Rollo, whimpered and stayed under the porch all day. I tried to brush off the unease, thinking maybe it was just a storm coming, but there were no clouds, no wind, no scent of rain in the air. It was just still, too still. Around noon, my aunt handed me a rusty key and pointed toward the shed at the far edge of the cornfield. "I need you to check the traps," she said. "Use the back path. Don't walk through the corn." I raised an eyebrow, but she only repeated herself, more firmly this time. "Don't walk through the corn." I asked her why, but she refused to explain. "Just don't," she said. "The field isn't safe." That made no sense to me. I'd grown up visiting farms all over the state and had never heard of corn being unsafe. It was just rows of plants, right? But my aunt's tone wasn't playful or paranoid. It was serious. Life and death serious. Still, curiosity tugged at me again. The back path was long and winding, and the cornfield was right there. Taking the shortcut would save me 20 minutes. So I did what any bored, mildly rebellious teenager would do. I ignored the rule. I stepped into the corn dot. At first, nothing happened. It was just stalks, tall and golden, brushing my arms as I made my way deeper. The sun was high above me, and the rows were tight but manageable. I kept walking straight, expecting to emerge on the other side within minutes, but the rows began to shift. I don't mean that metaphorically, they literally started curving, angling, bending in ways that made no sense. The space between the stalks grew narrower, and the light began to fade. I turned around, intending to retrace my steps, but the path behind me was gone, replaced with more corn. Identical rows stretching forever in every direction. Panic set in slowly, like water rising round my ankles. I called out, no answer. I pushed through the stalks in every direction, trying to find an edge or opening. But it was like the cornfield swallowed my sense of direction entirely. That's when I heard the whispering, not voices I could understand, just low, rustling murmurs. The corn itself seemed to shiver with it. I froze, listening. The whispers grew louder, closer. I spun around and saw something moving between the rows fast, low to the ground, but too large to be any animal I knew. I ran. I didn't care where. I just needed to move, to escape, to find anything that resembled a way out. As I dashed through the corn, the sky seemed to dim, like a cloud passed over the sun, but when I glanced upward, there were no clouds at all, only a faint pulsing shadow rippling above the stalks, circling. I kept running until I burst into a small clearing in the center of the field, a perfect circle with no plants growing in it, just dirt. And in the center of that clearing was a scarecrow. It wasn't like any scarecrow I'd ever seen. It wore a tattered black coat, its hat sat too low over its head, and its arms hung limp at its sides. No straw stuffed into the sleeves, no wooden pole propping it up, just ... hanging there. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off of it. Then the scarecrow twitched. Its head tilted slightly, and I swear I saw a glint of red where its eyes should have been. The whispers around me grew louder, angrier now, more frantic. The corn shook on all sides, though no wind blew. I didn't wait to see what happened. Next, I bolted in the opposite direction, crashing through rows of corn, uncaring of the pain as stalks cut my arms and face. Somehow, after what felt like an eternity, I tumbled out of the field, landing hard on the gravel path beside the shed. I was panting, bleeding slightly, and completely disoriented. My aunt was already there. She didn't say "I told you so." She didn't yell or scold. She just looked at me with a tired expression, handed me a wet rag, and said, "You're lucky." I didn't feel lucky. I felt like something had followed me out of the corn. I kept turning around, expecting to see movement in the field. But there was nothing. The rows were still again, swaying softly in the breeze, as if they hadn't just tried to swallow me whole. That night, I heard footsteps outside my window. Slow, heavy, dragging steps. I peeked out, but saw only the dark outline of the cornfield in the distance. My aunt sat in the rocking chair across the room, watching the window without blinking. "If it calls your name," she whispered, "don't answer." I didn't ask who it was. I didn't sleep either. The next morning, there were muddy footprints leading from the edge of the field to the base of the house, and then they stopped. Not a single print going back. The day my aunt warned me never to feed the animals after sunset, I didn't question her. Not at first. It was one of the many strange rules she had on the farm rules she'd written on a faded wooden board nailed beside the back door. Rule #6. No feeding the animals after dark, no matter how much they beg. At the time, it sounded silly. What could possibly go wrong if I gave the cows an extra scoop of feed or tossed the chickens a few more kernels after the sun had gone down? They were just animals. Harmless, familiar farm creatures. I didn't understand the rule until I broke it. That evening, my aunt had gone into town to visit the neighbor, leaving me alone on the property for the first time. I had just finished dinner when I heard its soft bleating from the barn, then louder, more persistent sounds. The cows were stomping restlessly. The goats cried like they were starving. Even the chickens were flapping around in a frenzy. I tried to ignore it at first, but their noises were strange, desperate. Like they weren't just hungry, they were pleading. I told myself it wouldn't hurt to give them a little extra. I didn't even check the time. The sky was dusky, painted with streaks of purple and orange, and I figured there was still a bit of daylight left. I grabbed a flashlight, a bucket of grain, and headed outside. The air was cooler than I expected, and the silence across the fields was heavy. Too heavy. The moment I opened the barn door, everything went quiet. Every animal stopped moving, their eyes fixed on me in unison. The cows didn't moo. The chickens didn't cluck. The goats stood frozen. They just stared. For a moment, I thought maybe I had startled them. But then they all stepped forward together, in perfect sync, like a single organism. Their eyes caught the beam of my flashlight, and for the briefest second, they reflected red. Not the natural glint you get from light hitting animal eyes. This was unnatural. Wrong. I felt a chill run through me, and my instincts screamed at me to back away. But I didn't. Instead, I slowly entered the barn, still holding the bucket. The animals didn't move. I scattered a few handfuls of grain across the floor. That's when everything changed. The goats were the first to move. Not eat, move. They began circling me, slowly, methodically, while making a low humming sound deep in their throats. The cows stood behind them, not blinking. The chickens gathered in a tight cluster near the wall, tilting their heads at impossible angles. The atmosphere was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I turned to leave, but the goats closed in. Their soft hooves were silent on the hay-covered floor, and yet their presence was thunderous. I dropped the bucket and shoved my way through, heart pounding. As I passed the cows, I heard one of them whisper. A voice, not a moo, not a grunt. A human-like whisper in a guttural, ancient tone. I didn't catch the words, but I felt them. Words that didn't belong in this world. The kind that made your bones feel colder just hearing them. I sprinted for the door and slammed it shut behind me, locking it with shaking hands. The second the lock clicked, every animal began to scream. It wasn't like before. This wasn't normal animal noise. It was loud, shrieking, frantic. It sounded like 100 voices crying out in pain, rage, and something else, hunger. I backed away from the barn, stumbling in the dirt, and ran into the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. The animal noises went on for hours, then stopped all at once at midnight, as if someone had flipped a switch. The next morning, I went back to the barn cautiously. The animals were quiet, calm, almost like nothing had happened, but when I looked closer, I noticed their eyes lingered on me longer than before. The chickens refused to come near. The cows stayed clustered in a far corner, and one of the goats had strange markings across its neck like symbols burned into its fur. I didn't tell my aunt. When she returned and asked if everything was okay, I nodded and kept quiet, but something had changed. That night, I locked every door and window and kept the lights on. Still, I heard soft tapping on the window around midnight. I didn't check. I knew it wasn't a branch. The following nights, the noises increased. Hoofbeats across the porch, low growls near the back steps, scratching on the walls. Always at midnight, always ending by sunrise. I stayed in my room, clutching a flashlight and a knife, praying they'd go away. One night, I made the mistake of peeking out the window. There, standing in the yard, was one of the goats. But it wasn't right. It stood on two legs. Its eyes glowed, and its head twitched in sharp, unnatural jerks. It stared directly at me. When I blinked, it was gone. I don't feed the animals after sunset anymore. I don't go near them after dark. I don't even look toward the barn, because whatever I awakened that night, the thing that wears the skin of goats and cows and chickens, it remembers me, and it's waiting. My aunt's final rule was perhaps the most unsettling of all. Never look inside the red silo. Not don't go near it, not don't touch it, but specifically, don't look inside. She didn't explain why. In fact, she got unusually quiet when I asked her about it, as if even speaking of it might summon something. The silo stood at the far end of the property, partly hidden behind a cluster of trees, and unlike the other buildings on the farm, it was in perfect condition. No rust, no dents. Its paint was still a bright, vivid red, as though it had just been painted that morning. Even though my aunt insisted it hadn't been touched in decades. The first time I saw it, I felt an odd sensation in my chest, like something pressing lightly against my lungs. It didn't hurt, but it felt wrong, unnatural. The wind around it didn't move the same way. The grass near the base grew in a tight spiral. Animals never went near it. Even the birds avoided flying over it, changing their path mid-air. Still, curiosity got the better of me. It always does, doesn't it? especially when someone tells you not to do something. It becomes a fixation, a whisper in your mind, getting louder each day. Just look, one quick glance. What's the harm? That night, I waited until my aunt was asleep and grabbed a flashlight. I crossed the field slowly, the light barely cutting through the heavy fog that had rolled in out of nowhere. The closer I got to the silo, the quieter the world became. No insects, no rustling of leaves, not even my own footsteps made a sound. It was as if the air had turned to thick, soundless jelly. My ears rang from the silence. When I reached the base of the silo, I paused. There were no doors, no handles, just one small rectangular hatch at eye level, sealed shut with what looked like iron latches that had no rust whatsoever. I knew then that something had been maintaining this silo. Something had been using it. Still, I reached forward and touched the hatch. It was warm, warmer than it should have been, like something alive was pulsing behind it. My hands moved on their own. I unlatched the top lock. A low hum began vibrating in my ears. I undid the second latch, and a gust of warm, foul-smelling air hissed out of the seam. My instinct screamed at me to stop, but it was too late. I opened the hatch and looked inside. At first, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. It was too dark, and my flashlight refused to work. No matter how many times I tapped it, it flickered weakly and then died. But my eyes began to adjust. The inside of the silo wasn't filled with grain or hay. It was breathing. The walls pulsed with a slick, wet texture, almost like the inside of a throat. Thick black veins ran across the surface and throbbed rhythmically. At the center was a single, floating mass, shapeless, twitching, and suspended in the air like it was underwater. Eyes began to open along its surface, one by one, until dozens of them were staring directly at me, and then it spoke. Not out loud, but in my head, a voice that wasn't a voice, just raw meaning, pouring directly into my brain like molten tar. It knew my name. It knew my thoughts. It knew everything about me, including things I had never said out loud. And it was hungry. The eyes blinked in unison, and the mass began to drift toward the hatch. I slammed it shut, latching it so fast I nearly broke my fingers. I stumbled backward, shaking, my heart racing so hard I thought it might explode. But I couldn't scream. I couldn't even cry. Something had been inside me briefly, but completely. It had touched my thoughts. It had left something behind. As I ran back toward the house, I could feel it watching me. Not from the silo, but from inside. The next morning, my aunt didn't say anything. She just looked at me, nodded slightly, and poured my coffee, as if she knew. I tried to act normal, but the feeling didn't go away. Over the next few days, I began having dreams of the red spiral in the grass, of hundreds of eyes floating in the dark, of a voice whispering, in a language I had never learned but somehow understood. My nose began to bleed at random. My reflection started lagging behind me in mirrors, like it was remembering itself too slowly. Animals wouldn't come near me. The dog growled when I entered the room. The cat refused to look at me. One night, I woke up standing in the field. I don't remember getting there. I was barefoot, and my feet were muddy and bruised. I was only a few yards away from the silo. The hatch was open, just a crack. I closed it again and ran. That's when I realized this wasn't just a rule. It was a barrier. My aunt hadn't been warning me to keep me safe. She'd been containing something. Something old. Something patient. Something that had been waiting for someone like me. Now, I can feel it growing stronger. Every day, the dreams get clearer. Every night, I wake up closer to the silo. I've stopped eating. I've stopped sleeping. And sometimes, when I pass a mirror, I see one of its eyes looking back at me.